Let's get into all of this with my panel, Sky News host and broadcaster Chris Smith in Sydney, Sky News host of Across Australia and the Front Page. Double duty, Gleeson. You're a busy man. Peter Gleeson joins me now live from Brisbane. All right, I got into that with Trudy, but you're the opinion pointy end of the show, fellas. If she's legally signed and legally dated an instrument, and this is all under law, it's to expend public money, and it's dated the 4th, and caretaker doesn't kick into the 11th, it doesn't particularly matter when the department gets the brief. As I've tried to explain, I think they can often be a couple of days or even a week between transit from one office to the other. Like, seriously, is Labor so desperate for a political scandal? They've got her scalp. I'd be saying move on. Gleeson.
Well, I think it's the greatest political beat-up in Australian history. As you say, Peter, they've got their scalp. She's a politician. She's employed to make decisions. Now, did they curry favour with the LNP electorates? Of course they did. Of course they did. But that's what politicians do. They represent their electorates and they try and stay within the rules. She's fallen on a sword. She's done nothing legally wrong. I mean, if she'd done anything legally wrong, she'd be in deep trouble. But look, you're right. I think this smacks of desperation. If they're going after the Prime Minister on sports rorts after the Minister has gone, it just goes to show that they're really struggling to get any traction on other issues.
Yeah, and look, we know, Chris Smith, that there's sort of growing angst inside Labor, particularly on the Labor right, about the announcement in relation to net zero emissions by 2050.
Yeah.
I wish we could have a better acronym for all of that because it's quite wordy. But they feel that Anthony Albanese has brought onto Labor a focus on an uncosted policy and regurgitated all the angst out of last year's election campaign when Bill Shorten himself had a 2030 policy that was uncosted. So Labor don't want to be the issue, but they've made themselves an issue, and I almost feel like they've gone back to the well of sports rorts, hoping that they might distract and move on to ground where the government becomes the focus. But I have to say, I think people think that there's a pox on both political houses when it comes to grants programs. I don't know that it's such a winner.
Talk to your average Joe, Peter, as you do, as I do, as Gleeson does, and they'll say, oh, they all do it, they all do it. I don't think this has the traction that those in the Labor Party behind the scenes are saying, oh, we're on a good one here. I don't think it has the traction. And I'm glad you've linked this to what they've come out with last weekend and zero emissions targets for 2050, because this is a smother. They're trying to get into week 3. This is week 3 of sports rorts in the parliament. We're over it. And I start to glaze over when Anthony Albanese tries to convince the House that a paper signed on election day means, oh, this was pushed through when they had no right to push it through. Well,
No, hang on. A paper received on the day the election was called, but signed much earlier.
Yeah.
That's the difference.
And he's also saying that the Prime Minister is the master chef of the cookbooks. I'd love him to go outside the Parliament and maybe repeat that and see if he can get away with it. The master chef of the cookbooks. Look, it's an overreach. They're overreaching to try and smother what they've come to the Parliament with and zero emissions. They can't explain how much it'll cost. This will go on exactly the way it did with Bill Shorten. They've got to find other things to keep us distracted. And I'm sorry, I'm not only distracted, I glaze over all of this stuff. It's starting, as you said, do my head in two.
Yeah, look, I think you're right to pick up that MasterChef line. I think it cheapened Labor's argument. It looked like they were trying to get a grab up for the 6 o'clock news.
Yes.
To me, it looked far too tabloid for this then to be relegated to serious issue status, you know. And yeah, I think it's desperation politics. If their 2030 or 2050 now target for net zero emissions was as good as they think it is, you know, was the great big thump in the electorate, then they would be talking of nothing else, uphill, down dale, 24 hours a day, but they're not.
But they're not, because everyone's talking about the fact that it's going to cost $400 billion.
Correct.
And then you've got the UK experience, which has come out in the last 2 days, of $3 trillion to get the same thing happening in 2050 in the UK. It's a dead duck.
And I've got some terrific stats. I'm going to write about this in my column on the weekend on Sunday. News Corp papers around the country. Some terrific stats about what countries are doing what, and it will absolutely surprise you. It's very different than what Labor's telling you in relation to this 2050 target.